Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What if everything you have been told about twin flame union is only half the truth? What if the reunion you have been waiting for, the moment when your twin flame finally comes back, chooses you, and the two of you build a life together, was never meant to begin outside of you? This idea can feel uncomfortable at first, because when people enter the twin flame journey, they almost always believe the same thing. That union means being physically together. Two people, one destiny, one relationship that finally works. So they wait. They wait for a message. They wait for an apology. They wait for the runner to wake up. They wait for the universe to bring them back. Sometimes that waiting lasts months. Sometimes it lasts years. And during that time, a silent question keeps echoing inside their heart. Why hasn't union happened yet? If the connection is so powerful, if the bond is so undeniable, if the universe truly brought us together, then why does it feel like the closer I try to get, the further they move away? This is the moment when many twin flames begin to feel confused. Some begin to doubt the journey. Some begin to blame their twin flame. Others start blaming themselves. They think, maybe I didn't heal enough. Maybe I said the wrong thing. Maybe they found someone else. Maybe I lost my chance. But what if the real question is not why union hasn't happened yet? What if the real question is something much deeper? What if the universe was never asking you to chase union in the outer world, but to discover it within yourself first? This is the truth that many people on the twin flame journey overlook. And it is also the moment when everything begins to change. Because the twin flame journey is not simply a love story between two people. It is a spiritual mirror. A mirror that reveals every hidden wound, every unconscious pattern, every place within you that is still searching for love outside of yourself. At the beginning of the journey, most people do not see this. They see the connection. They see the chemistry. They feel the magnetic pull that seems impossible to explain. Maybe you remember the first moment you met your twin flame. Something about it felt different. Not just attraction, not just compatibility. Felt like recognition. Like your soul suddenly remembered something your mind could not explain. A strange familiarity. A feeling of coming home. Conversations that flowed effortlessly. Moments of silence that felt deeper than words. Eye contact that seemed to last longer than time itself. And somewhere inside, a quiet thought appeared. I've known this person before. Not in this lifetime, but somewhere beyond memory. For many people, that first stage feels magical. Feels like destiny unfolding. Like the universe finally bringing two souls together. But then something unexpected happens. The dynamic begins to change. The connection becomes intense. Old wounds start surfacing. Fear begins to appear. One person pulls closer. The other begins to pull away. And suddenly, the love that once felt effortless becomes complicated. This is the stage many people call the runner and chaser dynamic. One twin flame tries to hold on to the connection. The other seems to escape it. The more one reaches out, the more the other withdraws. The more one tries to fix the relationship, the more distance appears. Can feel heartbreaking. Can feel confusing. And sometimes it can feel deeply unfair. Because from the outside it looks like love should bring people closer, not push them apart. So people begin searching for answers. They watch videos. They read articles. They study the twin flame journey. They try to understand what is happening. And almost every explanation eventually leads to the same conclusion. Union will happen when both twin flames are ready. First, this idea seems comforting. But it can also create a subtle trap. Because many people interpret it in a very specific way. They believe that if they heal enough, if they wait long enough, if they love their twin flame deeply enough, eventually the other person will come back. And when they do, that will be union. But here is the deeper truth that very few people talk about. Union does not begin when your twin flame returns. Union begins the moment you stop believing that someone else holds the missing piece of your soul. This realization can feel shocking, because the twin flame connection is so powerful that it naturally makes you feel incomplete without the other person. It awakens emotions you have never felt before. It opens your heart in ways you never expected. And when separation happens, the emptiness can feel overwhelming. But the purpose of that emptiness is not punishment. It is transformation. The twin flame journey is designed to reveal every place where you have been searching for love, validation, or wholeness outside of yourself. And when those patterns are exposed, you are given a choice. You can continue chasing the external reunion, or you can begin the much deeper journey of creating union within. Inner union. This is the part of the twin flame path that changes everything. Because inner union is not about waiting. It is not about convincing someone to come back. And it is not about proving your love to another person. Inner union is about restoring balance inside your own soul. It is the moment when the two fundamental energies within every human being, the divine masculine and the divine feminine, begin to harmonize within you. Most people think these energies exist only between two people, but in truth they exist inside every person. Your divine feminine holds your intuition, emotional depth, compassion, creativity, and ability to feel. Your divine masculine holds your direction, structure, boundaries, discipline, and ability to act. When these energies are out of balance, life begins to feel chaotic. You may become overly dependent on others for emotional security, or you may shut down your emotions and try to control everything logically. But when these energies begin to align within you, something remarkable happens. You stop searching for someone to complete you. You begin to feel whole. Not because someone returned, but because you finally returned to yourself. And this is where the real twin flame journey begins. Not in the moment you meet them, not in the moment they leave, but in the moment you realize that the love you were searching for outside was always meant to awaken inside you first. So let me ask you something. What if the universe never separated you from your twin flame as a punishment? What if the separation was actually an invitation? An invitation to discover a deeper kind of love. A love that does not depend on someone staying. A love that does not collapse when someone leaves. A love that begins with you. Because when that love is finally awakened within you, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The chasing stops. The waiting dissolves. The need for validation fades away. And for the first time on the twin flame journey, you are no longer trying to reach union. You are becoming it. And that is the moment when the entire journey reveals its true purpose. For many people on the twin flame journey, the idea of union seems simple. Union means being together. Two people who were separated finally reunite. The runner comes back. The relationship becomes stable. Love flows freely again, and all the confusion of the past suddenly makes sense. At least, that is what most people imagine. When someone first discovers the concept of twin flames, they often encounter stories that sound almost like modern fairy tales. Stories where two souls are destined for each other across lifetimes. Stories where separation is only temporary, and reunion is inevitable. These narratives are powerful. They give hope. They give meaning to the pain of separation. They suggest that everything that happened, the intense attraction, the sudden distance, the emotional turbulence, was all part of a divine plan leading toward one final moment. Union. So naturally, many people begin to focus their entire journey on that moment. They imagine the day when their twin flame will return. Maybe it will happen after a long period of silence. Maybe it will happen unexpectedly, through a message, a phone call, or a chance encounter. They imagine hearing the words they have been waiting for. I realized what we have is real. I never stopped thinking about you. I'm ready now. For a brief moment, everything seems like it will finally fall into place. The emotional wounds will heal. The confusion will disappear. The connection will feel peaceful instead of chaotic. And life will finally move forward. This belief is understandable, but it also creates one of the most powerful illusions on the twin flame journey. The illusion that union is something that happens outside of you. Because when union is defined only as a relationship with another person, your entire sense of progress becomes dependent on their actions. If they return, you feel hope. If they remain distant, you feel stuck. If they enter another relationship, you feel devastated. Suddenly, your spiritual journey is no longer guided by your own growth. It becomes tied to the unpredictable choices of another human being. And this is where many people begin to feel trapped. Months pass, sometimes years. The connection still feels real, but the reunion never seems to arrive. At first, people respond by trying harder. They analyze every detail of the past relationship. They replay conversations in their mind. They search for signs, synchronicities, and spiritual confirmations that the universe is bringing them back together. Every number sequence, every dream, every coincidence begins to feel like a message. Some people interpret these signs as reassurance. Others interpret them as instructions to keep waiting. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. Instead of moving forward with their own lives, many people become emotionally suspended in the story of the twin flame connection. They begin to measure time differently, not by what they are building or experiencing in their own lives, but by how long it has been since they last heard from their twin flame. 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, sometimes even longer. During this time, the mind creates a narrative. It says, "The universe is preparing us. They just need more time to awaken. When they finish their karmic lessons, they will return." While these ideas can contain elements of truth, they can also become a way of avoiding a deeper realization. Because the longer someone waits for an external reunion, the more their emotional energy remains focused on someone else's journey instead of their own. This is the quiet paradox of the twin flame illusion. The journey that was meant to awaken you to your own wholeness can slowly turn into a story of longing and waiting. And the more intensely you focus on the reunion, the more distant it can begin to feel. This is not because the connection was false. It is because the purpose of the connection was misunderstood. The twin flame journey is not designed to teach you how to wait for love. It is designed to show you where you have been seeking completion outside of yourself. This realization can feel uncomfortable, because when the connection first appears, it feels so extraordinary that it is natural to believe it must lead to a relationship. After all, how could something so powerful exist without a physical union at the end? But the deeper truth of the twin flame path is more complex than a romantic storyline. The connection is real. The recognition between souls is real. The emotional intensity is real. But the meaning behind those experiences is often very different from what people expect. Instead of being the final destination, the connection is the catalyst. It triggers a profound internal process. It brings unresolved emotions to the surface. It exposes patterns that have been hidden for years. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. Many people discover that the pain they feel during separation is not only about their twin flame leaving. It is also connected to deeper emotional wounds that existed long before the relationship began. Childhood experiences, past relationships, moments where love felt conditional or uncertain. The twin flame connection amplifies these wounds because it touches the deepest layers of the heart. And when those wounds are activated, the natural instinct is to reach outward for reassurance, to seek comfort from the person who awakened those feelings. But this is exactly where the illusion begins to dissolve. Because the twin flame journey gradually reveals that the healing you are seeking cannot come from the other person. It must come from within you. This does not mean the connection was meaningless. It means the connection had a different purpose than what most people initially believe. Instead of bringing two incomplete people together, the journey is meant to guide each person toward their own inner wholeness. And this is where the concept of union begins to transform. Union is no longer defined only as two people being in a relationship. It becomes something deeper, something internal. Union becomes the moment when you stop searching for someone else to validate your worth. It becomes the moment when your sense of identity no longer depends on whether someone stays or leaves. It becomes the moment when love is no longer something you are trying to receive from another person, but something that naturally flows from your own inner balance. This shift is not easy. In fact, it can be one of the most challenging realizations on the entire twin flame path. Because it asks you to release the idea that happiness will arrive when someone else changes. It asks you to release the belief that closure can only come through reunion. And most importantly, it asks you to turn your attention inward. To ask yourself questions that go far beyond the relationship. Questions like, why did this connection affect me so deeply? What parts of myself did I lose while trying to hold on to this relationship? What would my life look like if I stopped waiting for someone to return? These questions do not have quick answers, but they open the door to a completely different understanding of the twin flame journey. one where the focus shifts away from external events and toward internal transformation. And when that shift begins, something remarkable starts to happen. The story of longing slowly becomes a story of awakening. The emotional chaos begins to settle. The need for constant signs and confirmations fades. Instead of asking when your twin flame will come back, you begin asking something far more powerful. Who am I becoming through this journey? And that is the moment when the illusion of external union starts to dissolve. Because the deeper you explore your own healing, the clearer it becomes that the twin flame journey was never meant to trap you in waiting. It was meant to guide you toward the discovery of your own inner union, a union that no separation can break, a union that no external relationship can define, a union that begins the moment you stop searching for love outside of yourself and begin remembering that it has always lived within you. At some point in the twin flame journey, a quiet but unsettling realization begins to emerge. The connection you once believed would lead directly to a romantic union begins to feel like something much bigger than a relationship. The emotional intensity, the sudden awakenings, the painful separations, the strange synchronicities that seem to appear when you least expect them, all of it begins to feel like pieces of a puzzle that cannot be explained by ordinary love alone. And slowly, a deeper question starts forming within you. Why did this connection happen at all? Because if the purpose of the twin flame journey were simply to create a relationship, the process would likely be much simpler. Two people would meet, they would recognize their bond, they would build a life together. But that is rarely how the twin flame story unfolds. Instead, the journey often follows a very different path. Two people meet and experience an immediate and powerful connection. Everything feels intense, alive, almost magical. It is as if something ancient and familiar has suddenly awakened between them. But just when the connection begins to deepen, something shifts. Fear appears. Old wounds surface. One person pulls away. The other tries to hold on. And what once felt effortless becomes confusing and painful. From a traditional perspective on relationships, this dynamic seems dysfunctional. People naturally wonder, if this connection is so spiritual, why is it so difficult? If we are meant to be together, why does the universe allow so much separation? If the love is real, why can't it simply work? These questions are valid, but they often arise from a misunderstanding of the true purpose behind the twin flame experience. Because the twin flame journey was never designed to function like a typical relationship path. Its purpose is transformation. Deep, often uncomfortable transformation. In many ways, the twin flame connection acts like a spiritual catalyst. It accelerates personal growth at a speed that most people would never encounter in ordinary life. When you meet your twin flame, it is as if a mirror is suddenly placed directly in front of your soul. Not a mirror that reflects only your strengths and beauty, but a mirror that reveals everything. Your deepest desires, your hidden fears, your emotional wounds, your unconscious patterns in love. Many people spend years avoiding these parts of themselves. They distract themselves with work, relationships, responsibilities, and daily routines. But the twin flame connection has a way of bypassing those defenses. It reaches directly into the emotional core. And once that door is opened, it cannot easily be closed again. This is why the connection often feels so overwhelming. It awakens feelings that were buried long ago. It exposes insecurities that may have been hidden for years. Suddenly, questions that were once easy to ignore become impossible to avoid. Why do I feel abandoned so easily? Why does rejection affect me so deeply? Why do I feel like I must prove my worth to be loved? Why do I fear losing this person so much? The intensity of the twin flame journey does not come from the other person alone. It comes from the parts of yourself that the connection reveals. In this way, your twin flame becomes a mirror of your inner world. Not because they intentionally try to hurt you, but because their presence naturally activates the emotional patterns that already exist within you. And when those patterns appear, they demand attention. For some people, this process begins during the relationship itself. For others, it becomes most intense during separation. Separation is often the stage that people fear the most. It can feel like loss, like unfinished business, like a love story that stopped in the middle. But from a spiritual perspective, separation often serves a very specific purpose. It creates the space necessary for inner awakening. When the external connection is no longer available in the same way, the mind has fewer distractions. The focus begins to turn inward. And this is where the real work of the twin flame journey begins. Not the work of fixing the relationship, but the work of understanding yourself. During this stage, many people begin exploring areas of personal growth they had never considered before. They start reflecting on their emotional patterns. They begin healing childhood wounds. They learn to establish boundaries. They reconnect with passions and dreams that were previously neglected. Some people begin meditation or spiritual practices. Others focus on therapy, self-development, or creative expression. What begins as heartbreak slowly transforms into a deeper process of self-discovery. At first, this transformation may feel accidental, but over time a pattern becomes clear. The twin flame journey consistently pushes both individuals toward growth. Even if they are not consciously trying to evolve, even if they resist the process, the connection itself becomes the trigger. And the more someone tries to avoid the lessons, the more persistent those lessons become. This is why the journey can sometimes feel relentless, because it is not simply asking you to understand love. It is asking you to understand yourself, to examine the beliefs you carry about relationships, to recognize the ways you seek validation from others, to release the parts of your identity that were built around fear rather than authenticity. This process can be uncomfortable, sometimes even painful, because growth often requires letting go of old patterns that once felt familiar. But it also leads to something extraordinary, a deeper relationship with yourself. And this is the hidden purpose behind the entire twin flame journey. It is not just about meeting another soul. It is about remembering your own. Many people begin the journey believing that their twin flame will complete them. But the real transformation occurs when they discover that they were never incomplete to begin with. The connection simply revealed the parts of themselves that were waiting to be healed, integrated, and awakened. And when that healing begins, something remarkable starts to change. The emotional intensity that once felt chaotic begins to settle. The constant focus on the other person slowly softens. You begin to see the connection differently, not as something you must hold on to at all costs, but as something that served a sacred purpose in your life. You recognize that the journey was never meant to take something away from you. It was meant to give something back. Your awareness, your power, your self-love. In this way, the twin flame connection becomes less about romance and more about awakening. Less about finding someone else, and more about rediscovering yourself. And when this realization finally sinks in, the entire story of the journey begins to shift. Because the question is no longer, when will we be together again? Instead, a new question appears. A deeper one. What is this experience teaching me about who I truly am? That question marks the beginning of a profound transformation, one that slowly leads you toward the next stage of the journey, the stage where you begin to understand what true inner union really means. At some point on the twin flame journey, a phrase begins to appear again and again. You hear it in spiritual discussions. You see it mentioned in videos, books, and online communities. Inner union. For many people, the term sounds inspiring but also confusing. What exactly does it mean? If the goal of the twin flame journey is union, and union usually implies two people coming together, then how can union exist within just one person? At first glance, the idea seems contradictory, but the deeper you explore the journey, the more you realize that inner union is not a metaphor. It is a real internal transformation, and in many ways, it is the foundation of the entire twin flame experience. To understand inner union, we first need to step back from the idea that the twin flame journey is primarily about two separate individuals. Because on the surface, it certainly appears that way. You meet someone, you feel an extraordinary connection, your lives intertwine. Then something happens. Conflict, fear, separation, and the relationship becomes complicated. From this perspective, it feels like the story is about two people trying to find their way back to each other. But the deeper spiritual interpretation suggests something different. It suggests that the twin flame connection reflects something happening inside your own consciousness. This is where the concept of inner union begins. Within every human being exist two fundamental energetic principles. These are often called the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Despite the names, these energies are not determined by gender. Every person carries both. They represent two complementary aspects of human consciousness. The divine feminine is associated with qualities such as intuition, emotional awareness, compassion, creativity, and receptivity. It is the part of you that feels deeply, senses subtle energies, and connects with the flow of life. The divine masculine, on the other hand, is connected to structure, clarity, direction, discipline, and action. It is the part of you that creates order, sets boundaries, and moves ideas into reality. Both energies are essential. Neither is superior to the other. And when they work together harmoniously, they create balance within the individual. But in most people, these energies are not perfectly balanced. Life experiences, cultural conditioning, and emotional wounds often push one energy to dominate while the other becomes suppressed. For example, someone may become overly identified with the divine feminine side of their nature. They may feel emotions deeply, care intensely about others, and rely strongly on intuition. But if the divine masculine energy is underdeveloped, they may struggle with boundaries, decision-making, or self-direction. They might give too much in relationships. They might wait for others to lead. They might feel overwhelmed by emotional intensity. On the other hand, someone who is overly identified with the divine masculine may excel at planning, achieving goals, and maintaining control. But if the divine feminine energy is suppressed, they may struggle to express vulnerability or connect emotionally. They may distance themselves from feelings. They may avoid deep intimacy. They may appear strong on the outside while feeling disconnected inside. These imbalances are extremely common, and most of the time, people can live with them without fully recognizing their impact. But when a twin flame connection enters your life, those imbalances are suddenly magnified. The relationship acts like an energetic mirror. If your inner masculine and feminine energies are out of alignment, the dynamic with your twin flame often reflects that imbalance externally. For instance, one person may embody more of the emotional openness of the divine feminine. The other may embody the guarded independence of the divine masculine. One seeks closeness, the other seeks distance. One expresses vulnerability, the other retreats into silence. This dynamic often becomes known as the chaser and runner pattern. The chaser longs for connection. The runner fears losing their independence. From a psychological perspective, this dynamic can be explained through attachment patterns. But from a spiritual perspective, it also reflects the imbalance between the two inner energies. The chaser may be expressing an overactive feminine energy, deep feeling, longing, and emotional investment. The runner may be expressing an overactive masculine energy, distance, control, and avoidance of vulnerability. The more these energies remain unbalanced internally, the more the external relationship tends to reflect that tension. And this is where the deeper purpose of the journey begins to reveal itself. Because the twin flame path is not simply asking you to resolve the relationship. It is asking you to integrate these energies within yourself. This integration is what people mean when they talk about inner union. Inner union occurs when the divine masculine and divine feminine within you begin to work together, instead of pulling in opposite directions. It is the moment when your emotional awareness and your personal power become aligned, when intuition and action support each other, when compassion and boundaries coexist. In practical terms, inner union means something very simple yet very profound. It means that the love you once sought from another person becomes something you can generate within yourself. You no longer depend on someone else to validate your worth. You no longer feel incomplete without a relationship. You still appreciate love, connection, and companionship, but your sense of identity is no longer defined by them. Instead, you begin to feel something new. Quiet stability, a grounded sense of self, a feeling that your life has meaning and direction regardless of who is present in your romantic life. This shift can be subtle at first. You may notice that you think about your twin flame less frequently, not because the connection has disappeared, but because your emotional center is no longer revolving around it. You may find yourself focusing more on your own growth, creativity, friendships, and purpose. You may feel less anxious about the future of the connection, less desperate for answers, less attached to outcomes. Instead of constantly asking, "When will they come back?" you begin asking a different question. What kind of life do I want to create? This is one of the earliest signs that inner union is beginning to take root, because the energy that was once directed toward chasing or waiting is now being reclaimed. It is being invested in your own healing, your own dreams, your own sense of wholeness, and as this transformation deepens, something remarkable begins to happen. The emotional turbulence that once defined the twin flame journey starts to settle. You no longer feel pulled between hope and despair. You no longer feel like your happiness depends on someone else's choices. Instead, you begin to experience a new kind of relationship with the connection itself. A relationship based on peace rather than longing. You may still feel love for your twin flame. You may still recognize the spiritual bond that exists between you. But that love no longer feels like something you must chase. It becomes something quieter, more spacious, more mature. And in that space, the concept of union itself begins to transform. Because you realize something that many people never discover. Union was never meant to begin with another person. It was meant to begin within you. When your inner masculine and feminine energies come into balance, you no longer feel divided inside. You no longer feel like different parts of yourself are fighting for control. You become integrated, whole. And from that place of inner wholeness, love becomes something entirely different. Not something you search for, not something you cling to, but something that naturally flows through your life. This is the true meaning of inner union. And once you begin to experience it, you start to understand why the twin flame journey had to unfold the way it did. Because without the intensity of that connection, without the mirror it provided, you might never have discovered the extraordinary balance that was waiting to awaken within you all along. To truly understand the twin flame journey, it is essential to understand something that many people overlook in the beginning. The connection between twin flames is not only about two individuals meeting in the physical world. It is also about two fundamental energies that exist inside every human being. These energies are often called the divine masculine and the divine feminine. When people first hear these terms, they sometimes assume they refer to men and women. But this is a misunderstanding. The divine masculine and divine feminine are energetic principles, not biological genders. Every person carries both energies regardless of whether they identify as male or female. These two forces exist within your emotional, mental, and spiritual nature. They influence how you think, how you act, how you respond to challenges, and how you experience love. And when these energies are out of balance, they can create inner conflict that eventually shows up in your relationships. To understand how inner union works, we must first explore what each of these energies represents. Let's begin with the divine feminine. The divine feminine is the energy of feeling, intuition, and receptivity. It is the part of you that connects with emotions, empathy, and the subtle currents of life. When the divine feminine is active within someone, they often experience the world through a deep emotional lens. They sense the moods of others. They feel compassion easily. They are naturally drawn to connection, nurturing, and understanding. The divine feminine is also closely related to intuition. It is the quiet inner voice that senses truth before the mind has time to analyze it. Many people on the twin flame journey first recognize the connection through this intuitive awareness. They may not fully understand why the bond feels so powerful, but something inside them simply knows that it is significant. The divine feminine also expresses itself through creativity and imagination. Artists, musicians, writers, and healers often draw strongly from this energy. It allows a person to perceive beauty, symbolism, and meaning in the world around them. But the divine feminine is not only about softness and emotion. It also carries immense emotional strength. When balanced, it allows someone to hold space for difficult experiences without shutting down. It brings patience, compassion, and the ability to nurture both oneself and others. However, when the divine feminine becomes unbalanced, it can lead to certain challenges. A person may become overly emotionally dependent on others. They may seek validation through relationships. They may struggle to set boundaries or protect their own energy. Instead of flowing with intuition, they may become overwhelmed by emotions and uncertainty. In this state, the individual may constantly look outside themselves for reassurance. And this is where the twin flame dynamic often begins to intensify. Because if someone is operating primarily from an unbalanced divine feminine energy, They may feel an overwhelming need to hold on to the connection. They may fear losing it. They may wait, hope, and long for the other person to return. On the other side of this energetic spectrum lies the divine masculine. The divine masculine represents structure, direction, and action. It is the energy that moves ideas into reality. If the divine feminine is the ocean of emotion and intuition, the divine masculine is the steady shoreline that gives that ocean form. When the divine masculine energy is balanced within someone, they possess clarity and focus. They know how to make decisions. They establish boundaries. They take responsibility for their lives. This energy helps a person turn dreams into plans and plans into tangible results. The divine masculine also represents protection and stability. It provides the inner strength that allows someone to remain grounded, even during emotional storms. When someone has a healthy connection with their inner masculine energy, they feel capable of guiding their own life. They do not rely on others to define their direction. They create it themselves. But just like the divine feminine, the divine masculine can also become imbalanced. When it becomes overly dominant or distorted, it can lead to emotional disconnection. A person may become overly focused on control, logic, or independence. They may avoid vulnerability. They may distance themselves from deep emotional intimacy. In relationships, this imbalance can appear as emotional withdrawal or avoidance. Instead of confronting feelings, the person may retreat into work, distractions, or silence. This dynamic often appears in the twin flame journey as the runner energy. The runner may not consciously intend to hurt the other person, but the intensity of the emotional connection can feel overwhelming. And without a strong connection to their inner feminine energy, the part that allows emotional openness, they may instinctively pull away. From the outside, this can appear confusing or even cruel, but from an energetic perspective, it often reflects an imbalance that exists within the individual. Now here is the fascinating part of the twin flame journey. Most people enter the connection with both energies out of balance in different ways. One person may lean heavily into the emotional intensity of the divine feminine. The other may lean heavily into the independence and control of the divine masculine. This contrast creates the magnetic attraction that many people feel in the beginning, but it also creates tension. Because the more these energies remain unbalanced internally, the more the relationship begins to reflect that imbalance externally. The chaser pursues connection. The runner retreats. One seeks closeness. The other seeks space. This push and pull dynamic can continue for years if the underlying imbalance remains unaddressed. But the purpose of the twin flame journey is not to keep people trapped in this cycle. It is to guide both individuals toward integration. Integration means allowing both energies to exist within you in harmony. When your divine feminine and divine masculine begin to cooperate rather than compete, your entire relationship with life begins to change. Your intuition becomes clearer. Your emotions become more balanced. Your actions become more purposeful. You learn to feel deeply without losing your sense of stability. You learn to take action without disconnecting from compassion. This balance is what creates the foundation for inner union. And once inner union begins, the external dynamics of the twin flame relationship often start to shift as well. The person who once chased may begin to reclaim their independence. The person who once ran may begin to confront their emotional barriers. But the most important transformation happens internally, because when your inner masculine and feminine energies align, something powerful occurs. You stop searching for someone else to complete you. You realize that the qualities you once admired or depended on in another person already exist within you. Your intuition and your strength, your compassion and your boundaries, your sensitivity and your determination, all of it becomes part of a unified self. And from that place of wholeness, your relationships begin to change. Not because you force them to, but because the energy you bring into them has transformed. This is why understanding these two energies is so essential on the twin flame journey. Because the real work is not convincing someone else to change. It is learning to balance the powerful forces that already exist within your own soul. And when that balance begins to emerge, the entire journey takes on a new meaning. The connection that once felt chaotic becomes a teacher. The separation that once felt like loss becomes an opportunity. And the love you once searched for in another person becomes something you finally recognize within yourself. One of the most confusing aspects of the twin flame journey is the dynamic that many people experience shortly after the initial connection. At the beginning, everything feels almost magical. The conversations flow effortlessly. The emotional connection feels deep and immediate. There is a sense of recognition that is difficult to explain but impossible to ignore. For many people, this early stage feels like the discovery of something extraordinary. It can feel as if two souls have finally found each other after a long journey. But then something unexpected happens. The closeness becomes intense. Emotions begin to deepen. Vulnerability starts to appear. And suddenly the dynamic shifts. One person begins to move closer, wanting more connection, more communication, more reassurance. The other begins to move away. They withdraw emotionally. They create distance. Sometimes they disappear entirely. This pattern has become widely known in the twin flame community as the runner-chaser dynamic. The chaser feels pulled toward the connection and tries to hold on to it. The runner feels overwhelmed by the intensity and tries to escape it. At first, this dynamic can feel incredibly painful. The chaser may feel rejected, confused, and desperate for answers. They may wonder why someone who once seemed so deeply connected would suddenly pull away. The runner, on the other hand, may feel pressured, emotionally flooded, or unable to process the depth of the connection. They may not fully understand why the relationship feels so overwhelming, but their instinct is to create space. From the outside, this pattern can appear dysfunctional. It can look like a relationship where one person is constantly pursuing while the other is constantly avoiding. But when we examine this dynamic from the perspective of inner energy balance, a deeper explanation begins to emerge. The runner-chaser dynamic often reflects an imbalance between the divine feminine and divine masculine energies within each individual. Let's explore how this works. Imagine someone who is strongly connected to the emotional and intuitive qualities of the divine feminine. They feel love deeply. They sense the spiritual significance of the connection. They experience the bond as something meaningful and destined. But if their divine masculine energy, responsible for boundaries, self-direction, and emotional stability, is underdeveloped, they may struggle to maintain balance when the connection becomes intense. They may begin focusing all of their attention on the relationship. Their thoughts revolve around the other person. Their emotional state becomes tied to whether the twin flame responds, communicates, or shows affection. Without strong inner structure, the emotional intensity can become overwhelming. This is often the energy that appears as the chaser. The chaser is not simply someone who wants love. They are someone whose emotional world has become centered around the connection. Every message matters. Every silence feels significant. Every sign from the universe seems to confirm that the relationship must continue. But from the perspective of inner balance, the chaser is not only chasing the other person. They are often chasing the feeling of completion that the connection awakened within them. On the other side of the dynamic is the runner. The runner often embodies a stronger expression of the divine masculine energy. They value independence. They prioritize control and stability. They may have built their identity around logic, productivity, or personal freedom. When the twin flame connection appears, it introduces a level of emotional intensity that challenges that structure. Suddenly, feelings arise that they cannot easily explain. Vulnerability appears in ways they may not be accustomed to expressing. For someone who has spent years maintaining emotional distance or control, this can feel deeply uncomfortable. Without a balanced connection to the divine feminine energy, the part that allows emotional openness, the runner may instinctively retreat. They may tell themselves that the relationship is too complicated. They may convince themselves that they need space. They may distract themselves with work, other relationships, or daily responsibilities. But beneath those behaviors often lies a deeper truth. The connection has touched emotional layers that they are not yet ready to face. And rather than confronting those emotions directly, their instinct is to escape the situation that triggered them. This is why the runner-chaser dynamic can feel so frustrating for both people involved. The chaser interprets the runner's distance as rejection. The runner interprets the chaser's pursuit as pressure. The more the chaser reaches out, the more the runner feels the need to withdraw. The more the runner withdraws, the more the chaser feels compelled to pursue. This creates a cycle that can continue for months or even years. But here is the important realization that many people eventually discover. The runner-chaser dynamic is not simply about two people reacting to each other. It is about the imbalance of inner energies within each individual. The chaser is being asked to strengthen their inner masculine energy, to develop boundaries, to reclaim their independence, to build a life that does not revolve entirely around the connection. The runner is being asked to reconnect with their inner feminine energy, to explore emotional vulnerability, to allow themselves to feel rather than suppress what arises. In other words, both individuals are being guided toward balance. And balance cannot be achieved through chasing or escaping. It can only be achieved through inner growth. This is why the twin flame journey often includes periods of separation. Separation removes the immediate emotional stimulus of the connection. Without constant interaction, each person is forced to confront their own patterns. The chaser must learn how to stop seeking validation from the other person. The runner must confront the emotional barriers that cause them to retreat. At first, this process can feel painful, because the habits that sustain the runner-chaser dynamic are difficult to break. The chaser may feel an intense urge to reach out again. The runner may feel an equally strong urge to maintain distance. But as time passes and self-awareness grows, something begins to change. The chaser gradually realizes that their happiness cannot depend on someone else's presence. They begin to focus on their own healing. They rediscover passions, friendships, and personal goals that were overshadowed by the connection. Meanwhile, the runner may begin to reflect on why the connection affected them so deeply. They may recognize that the emotions they avoided were actually invitations to grow. Little by little, both individuals begin to develop the qualities they previously lacked. The chaser develops inner strength. The runner develops emotional openness. And as these energies begin to balance internally, the external dynamic starts to lose its intensity. The need to chase fades. The need to run softens. For the first time, both individuals begin to stand on their own emotional foundation. And this is where a profound shift occurs. Because the runner-chaser dynamic was never meant to be permanent. It was a stage of the journey, a mirror revealing where inner balance was needed. Once that balance begins to emerge, the cycle no longer serves a purpose. The connection becomes calmer, more mature, less driven by fear or attachment. And this is the moment when many people finally understand something that once seemed impossible. The runner was not truly running from the other person, and the chaser was not truly chasing the other person. Both were responding to unresolved energies within themselves. And when those energies begin to harmonize, the entire story of the connection begins to transform. The relationship is no longer defined by pursuit and escape. It becomes something entirely different. Something rooted not in imbalance, but in the gradual awakening of inner union. There is a moment on the twin flame journey that is both subtle and profound. It does not arrive with dramatic signs. There is no sudden announcement from the universe. No voice declaring that you have reached the next stage of your spiritual path. Instead, the moment inner union begins often arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. But once it happens, everything begins to change. For a long time on the twin flame journey, many people live in a state of emotional tension. Their thoughts constantly return to the connection. They analyze past conversations. They search for hidden meanings in every interaction. They look for signs that their twin flame is thinking about them too. And when communication disappears or distance grows, the mind begins asking the same questions over and over again. Why did they leave? What did I do wrong? Will they ever come back? During this stage, the connection feels like the center of your emotional universe. Every decision, every plan, every moment of hope or disappointment seems tied to the possibility of reunion. But slowly, sometimes after months, sometimes after years, something inside begins to shift. The questions start to lose their urgency. The constant analysis begins to fade. The emotional storm that once dominated your inner world starts to settle. And this is when inner union begins to emerge. It begins with a simple but powerful realization. You cannot control another person's journey. You cannot force someone to awaken. You cannot build a relationship by carrying all of the emotional responsibility alone. For many people, this realization feels like a release. Not a release from love itself, but from the pressure of trying to hold the connection together. Because for a long time, The chaser often believes that if they just understand the situation well enough, if they heal enough, if they remain patient enough, eventually the other person will return. But inner union begins the moment that belief starts to dissolve, not in a bitter or hopeless way, but in a peaceful and accepting way. You begin to understand that the twin flame journey was never about controlling the outcome. It was about transforming yourself. And when that understanding truly sinks in, your focus begins to turn inward. You start asking different questions. Instead of asking, when will they come back? You begin asking, what do I need to heal within myself? Instead of wondering, why did they choose someone else? You begin reflecting, what patterns in my life need my attention right now? Instead of waiting for a message that may or may not arrive, you begin rebuilding your own sense of direction. You reconnect with the parts of your life that may have been neglected during the emotional intensity of the connection. Your passions, your friendships, your personal goals, your inner growth. This stage is often misunderstood. Some people think that focusing on themselves means giving up on the twin flame connection. But that is not what is happening at all. Inner union does not require you to stop loving someone. It simply changes the way you love. Before inner union begins, love may feel intertwined with longing. You love them, but you also need them. You feel connected to them, but you also feel incomplete without them. Your emotional state rises and falls depending on what they do or do not do. After inner union begins, love becomes calmer. It becomes less about possession and more about appreciation. You can still care about the connection. You can still value the bond that exists between your souls. But you no longer feel like your happiness depends on whether that person is present in your life. You begin to stand on your own emotional foundation. This shift is incredibly powerful, because the energy that was once spent chasing or waiting is now being reclaimed. You begin investing it in your own life. You explore new opportunities. You rediscover creative passions. You deepen your spiritual practices. You strengthen your relationships with friends and family. And perhaps most importantly, you begin developing a relationship with yourself that is based on respect and compassion. For many people, this stage brings an unexpected sense of peace. The emotional chaos that once defined the twin flame journey begins to fade. The connection still exists, but it no longer feels overwhelming. Instead of constantly thinking about the other person, you begin experiencing moments where you simply enjoy your own life. Moments of laughter, moments of inspiration, moments of quiet contentment. And when you notice this change, you may feel surprised. Because for a long time, it seemed impossible to imagine life without the constant pull of the connection. But inner union is not about forgetting your twin flame. It is about remembering yourself. It is about rediscovering the parts of your identity that were overshadowed by the intensity of the relationship. Your talents, your dreams, your purpose. As this process continues, your inner masculine and feminine energies begin to balance more naturally. Your intuition becomes clearer. Your emotions become steadier. Your decisions become more aligned with your authentic values. You begin trusting yourself in ways you may never have trusted yourself before. And this trust becomes the foundation of inner union. Because when you trust yourself, you no longer need external validation to feel secure. You no longer need constant reassurance from another person. You know who you are. You know what you deserve. You know how to care for your own emotional well-being. From this place of inner stability, the twin flame connection begins to look different. Instead of seeing it as something that must lead to a specific outcome, you begin to see it as a catalyst for your awakening. You realize that meeting your twin flame forced you to confront parts of yourself that had been hidden for years. Your fears, your attachments, your insecurities, but it also revealed your strength, your resilience, your capacity for deep love and transformation. And when you look back at the journey from this perspective, the pain begins to take on a new meaning. It was never meant to break you. It was meant to reshape you. The separation was never meant to leave you empty. It was meant to guide you back to yourself. And this is the moment when the twin flame journey enters a new stage. Because when inner union begins, you are no longer waiting for someone else to complete your story. You are actively creating your own. Your life becomes something you participate in fully rather than something you pause while waiting for a reunion. And paradoxically, this is often when the external dynamic begins to shift as well. Not because you tried to force it, but because the energetic balance that once created the runner-chaser cycle has changed. The person who once chased no longer needs to chase. The person who once ran may begin to feel the absence of that pursuit. But whether or not reunion happens in the physical world becomes less important, because something far more meaningful has already taken place. You have reclaimed your own wholeness. You have discovered that love is not something you must search for outside of yourself. It is something that can grow within you. And once that inner love begins to flow freely, the journey that once felt like a search for someone else becomes something entirely different. It becomes a path back to your own soul. Sometimes the ideas behind the twin flame journey can feel abstract. Concepts like inner union, energetic balance, and spiritual awakening are powerful, but they can also feel difficult to understand without seeing how they unfold in real life. So let's explore a story that illustrates what inner union actually looks like in practice. Imagine a woman named Elena. When Elena first met the man she believed to be her twin flame, the connection felt immediate and undeniable. They met through mutual friends at a small gathering. The moment they began talking, something felt strangely familiar. Their conversation flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for years. They shared similar interests, similar life experiences, and a similar sense of humor. But more than that, there was an emotional depth in their interaction that Elena had never experienced before. Within weeks, the connection intensified. They spoke for hours late into the night. They shared personal stories they had never told anyone else. Their bond seemed to deepen with every conversation. Elena felt like she had finally met someone who truly understood her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that this connection might be the beginning of something lasting. But as often happens on the twin flame journey, the dynamic began to shift. The man who once seemed so open and engaged started to withdraw. At first it was subtle. He took longer to respond to messages. He seemed distracted during conversations. He canceled plans more frequently. Elena felt confused but tried to remain patient. She told herself that he was simply busy or dealing with personal stress. But the distance continued to grow. Eventually, he admitted that the connection felt overwhelming. He said he needed space. And just like that, the relationship that had once felt so promising came to an abrupt pause. For Elena, the experience was deeply painful. She replayed their conversations in her mind, searching for the moment when things began to change. She wondered if she had said something wrong. She wondered if she had asked for too much. And like many people on the twin flame journey, she began searching for answers. She discovered the concept of twin flames and immediately recognized many of the patterns described. The intense connection, the sudden separation, the feeling that the bond had a deeper spiritual purpose. At first, learning about the journey gave her comfort. It helped her understand that she was not alone in experiencing such a confusing dynamic. But over time, the knowledge also began to create a new kind of attachment. Elena started believing that reunion was inevitable. She convinced herself that if she remained patient and continued working on her personal growth, the man would eventually return. Months passed. Then a year. During that time, Elena continued thinking about him almost every day. She analyzed every memory. She searched for signs from the universe that they were still connected. Occasionally, he would reach out with a brief message, which reignited her hope. But the pattern always repeated itself. A moment of connection followed by distance. Hope followed by disappointment. Eventually, Elena began to notice how much of her emotional energy was tied to this cycle. Her happiness seemed to depend on whether or not he contacted her. When he appeared, she felt excited and hopeful. When he disappeared, she felt anxious and discouraged. Slowly, a realization began to form. Her life had become centered around waiting. Waiting for him to heal. Waiting for him to return. Waiting for the universe to finally bring them back together. And this realization was the beginning of her transformation. One evening, after another period of silence from him, Elena asked herself a question she had been avoiding for a long time. What if my life is meant to move forward, even if he never comes back? First, the question felt painful, but it also felt strangely liberating. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not revolve around the possibility of reunion. She began focusing on parts of her life that she had neglected. She returned to hobbies she once loved. She started taking classes related to her career. She spent more time with friends and family. She also began exploring deeper forms of self-reflection, meditation, journaling, therapy. Through these practices, Elena began uncovering emotional patterns that had shaped her relationships for years. She realized that she had always struggled with the fear of abandonment. When someone she loved created distance, she instinctively tried to close that distance as quickly as possible. She sought reassurance. She tried to fix the situation. She feared that if she did not act quickly, the relationship would disappear entirely. Recognizing this pattern was uncomfortable, but it was also empowering, because once she saw it clearly, she could begin changing it. Instead of chasing reassurance from others, she began learning how to reassure herself. Instead of focusing on what someone else was feeling, she began asking herself what she needed. This shift marked the beginning of Elena's inner union. She started strengthening the parts of herself that had previously been overlooked. Her inner masculine energy, her sense of direction, boundaries, and independence, began to grow stronger. At the same time, she continued nurturing her emotional awareness and compassion, allowing her divine feminine energy to remain open but balanced. The result was a new sense of stability. For the first time since meeting her twin flame, Elena felt emotionally grounded. She still cared about the connection. She still appreciated the impact the relationship had on her life, but she no longer felt controlled by it. Her thoughts about him became less frequent. Her days became fuller with activities, goals, and relationships that brought genuine joy. She began trusting that her happiness did not depend on any one person. And then something unexpected happened. Nearly 2 years after their separation, the man reached out again. This time the conversation felt different. There was no emotional urgency, no sense of desperation. Elena noticed that she was calm. She could speak with him openly, but she no longer felt the need to convince him of anything. She was simply herself. The interaction was friendly and sincere, but Elena did not feel compelled to rebuild the relationship immediately. She had learned something important during the time they spent apart. Her life no longer revolved around the possibility of reunion. She had created her own sense of inner stability. Whether the connection continued or not, she knew she would be okay. This is what inner union looks like in real life. It is not a sudden spiritual breakthrough. It is a gradual process of reclaiming your emotional independence. It is the moment when you stop defining your happiness through another person's choices and begin defining it through your own growth, purpose, and self-love. Elena's story reflects the experience of many people on the twin flame journey. The connection awakens something powerful. The separation triggers deep emotional reflection. And through that reflection, a new version of the self begins to emerge. A version that is stronger, more balanced, more connected to its own inner truth. And once that transformation takes place, the entire meaning of the journey changes. The connection that once felt like something you needed in order to feel complete becomes something else entirely. It becomes the catalyst that helped you discover the wholeness that was already within you all along. There comes a moment in the twin flame journey when something quiet but powerful begins to change within you. Not in your relationship status. Not in whether your twin flame has texted you. Not in whether you are physically together. The shift happens somewhere deeper. It happens inside your consciousness. Many people assume that union will arrive as a dramatic external event. A reunion, a confession of love, a sudden reconciliation. But the truth is much more subtle and much more profound. Before outer union can exist, inner union must be established. And when that inner union begins to form, your life starts to transform in ways that are unmistakable. Today we will explore the signs that you are approaching inner union. The sacred moment when the divine masculine and divine feminine energies inside you begin to harmonize, because when this happens, everything changes. The first sign, emotional stability. In the earlier stages of the twin flame journey, emotions often feel like a storm. One day you feel hope. The next day you feel despair. One message from your twin flame can make your entire world light up, and one moment of silence can send you into deep anxiety. You feel pulled between love and fear, connection and separation, expectation and disappointment. This emotional turbulence is not random. It is part of the awakening process. The twin flame connection acts like a mirror, reflecting every unresolved wound within you. Abandonment wounds, rejection wounds, fears of not being enough. But when inner union begins to approach, something remarkable happens. The storm begins to calm. You are no longer controlled by emotional extremes. Your twin flame may still come and go, but your inner peace no longer depends on their behavior. You feel grounded, centered, balanced. Instead of reacting impulsively, you observe your emotions with compassion. You begin to realize that your peace does not belong to another person. It belongs to you. And that realization is one of the first signs of inner union. The second sign, you stop chasing. One of the most painful dynamics in the twin flame journey is the chaser-runner cycle. One person longs for connection, the other pulls away. The more one pursues, the more the other distances themselves. This dynamic can repeat again and again, creating emotional exhaustion for both people. But inner union brings an unexpected transformation. You stop chasing, not because you no longer care, not because you have given up, but because something deeper has shifted inside you. You begin to understand that love cannot be forced. You realize that chasing someone who is not ready will only create resistance. So instead of running after your twin flame, you turn your attention inward. You focus on healing, growth, purpose, and something extraordinary happens when you do this. The energy of the connection changes, because chasing creates imbalance, but self-alignment creates magnetism. When you stop chasing, you start attracting. The third sign, you reclaim your identity. Another powerful sign of inner union is the rediscovery of who you truly are. In the early stages of the twin flame journey, it is easy to lose yourself in the connection. You think about your twin flame constantly. You analyze every interaction. You wonder what they are doing, what they are feeling, whether they are thinking about you. Slowly, your world begins to revolve around them. But inner union changes this completely. Instead of asking, "What are they doing?" you start asking, "What am I here to create?" Your focus shifts from the relationship to your soul mission. Maybe you begin pursuing a creative project you once abandoned. Maybe you focus on your career. Maybe you start helping others who are on similar journeys. Your life begins to expand again. And something magical happens when you reclaim your identity. You realize that your twin flame was never meant to replace your life. They were meant to awaken it. The fourth sign, forgiveness replaces resentment. Many twin flame journeys involve deep emotional pain, separation, miscommunication, broken expectations, moments when you feel abandoned or misunderstood. These experiences can leave behind resentment. You might think, how could they treat me this way? Why would they walk away from something so powerful? But as inner union approaches, your perspective begins to change. Instead of seeing your twin flame as someone who hurt you, you begin to see them as someone who triggered your healing. You start to understand that both of you were carrying wounds. Both of you were learning. Both of you were evolving. And slowly, resentment transforms into compassion. You forgive them, but more importantly, you forgive yourself. You forgive yourself for the times you abandoned your own needs, for the moments you ignored your intuition, for the ways you tried to control what could only unfold naturally. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the past. It is about freeing yourself from its weight. And when forgiveness enters your heart, inner union grows stronger. The fifth sign, you feel whole on your own. Perhaps the most important sign of inner union is this. You no longer feel incomplete without your twin flame. This does not mean you stop loving them. It does not mean the connection disappears. It simply means that your sense of wholeness no longer depends on another person. You feel complete within yourself. You enjoy your own company. You make decisions based on your truth rather than your fears. And something beautiful emerges from this state of wholeness. Instead of seeking someone to complete you, you begin to attract someone who complements you. Because healthy love is not about filling a void. It is about two whole souls choosing to walk together. A story of inner union. Let's consider a simple example. Imagine a woman named Maya. For years, Maya believed her twin flame was the missing piece of her happiness. When they were together, she felt alive. When they separated, she felt lost. She spent countless nights wondering when they would reunite. But eventually something changed. She stopped waiting. Instead, she started focusing on her own growth. She began journaling, meditating, building the career she had always dreamed about. Little by little, she rediscovered her confidence, her peace, her identity. And one day she realized something surprising. For the first time in years, she felt happy, even though her twin flame was not physically present in her life. That moment marked the beginning of inner union, because she had finally reunited with the most important part of the connection, herself. The hidden paradox. Here is one of the greatest paradoxes of the twin flame journey. The moment you stop needing your twin flame is often the moment the universe begins bringing you back together. Why? Because need creates attachment. Attachment creates pressure. Pressure creates resistance. But when you feel whole within yourself, the energy becomes different. Instead of holding on tightly, you allow life to unfold naturally. And in that space of freedom, authentic connection becomes possible again. So let me ask you something important. Are you waiting for your twin flame to return so that you can finally feel whole? Or are you becoming whole now regardless of what they do? Because the twin flame journey was never meant to trap you in longing. It was meant to guide you toward self-realization. The reunion you seek outside is actually the reflection of a reunion that must happen within. The real meaning of union. Union is not just about two people coming together. Union is about the integration of energies within the soul. The divine masculine energy that gives you direction, strength, and structure. The divine feminine energy that gives you intuition, compassion, and emotional depth. When these energies begin to harmonize inside you, something extraordinary happens. You become balanced, grounded, authentic. And from that place of inner harmony, love can finally flow freely. Not from need, not from fear, but from wholeness. At some point in the twin flame journey, almost everyone asks the same painful question. If this connection is real, why are we not together? If twin flames are meant to reunite, why does the universe allow separation? Why does the path feel so long? So confusing. Sometimes even unbearable. Many people assume separation is a sign that something went wrong, that the timing was bad, that someone made a mistake, or worse, that the connection was never real to begin with. But what if the opposite were true? What if the delays, the distance, and even the silence were part of the design? Because in the twin flame journey, the universe is not trying to punish you. It is trying to prepare you. And preparation often takes time. The illusion of timing. In ordinary relationships, timing seems simple. Two people meet. They fall in love. They decide to build a life together. But the twin flame journey does not follow ordinary timelines. It operates on soul timing, not human expectations. Human timing says, "I'm ready now. I've waited long enough. It shouldn't take this long." But soul timing asks a very different question. Are you truly ready for the level of love this connection requires? Because twin flame union is not just a romantic relationship. It is a spiritual partnership, a mirror, a catalyst, a force that exposes every hidden fear, insecurity, and unresolved wound. If two people enter that level of connection without emotional maturity, the relationship can collapse under its own intensity. So the universe does something that often feels cruel in the moment. Slows things down, not to deny the connection, but to protect it. Why separation is often necessary. Think about what happens when two mirrors face each other. Every reflection multiplies. Every detail becomes amplified. The twin flame connection works the same way. It reflects everything within you. Your deepest love, your deepest fears, your strengths, your wounds. When twin flames first meet, this reflection can feel overwhelming. One person may become emotionally dependent. The other may feel trapped or pressured. Old trauma begins to surface. Patterns from childhood relationships appear again. Suddenly, what started as an intense spiritual connection becomes emotionally chaotic. And this is where separation often begins. But separation is not failure. It is space for transformation. During this time apart, each person is forced to confront parts of themselves they might otherwise avoid. The chaser learns self-worth. The runner learns emotional responsibility. Both people begin healing the wounds that were silently shaping their behavior. Without separation, this growth might never happen. The role of divine masculine and divine feminine healing. Another reason the universe delays reunion is that both energies, the divine masculine and the divine feminine, must evolve. In many twin flame dynamics, the divine feminine awakens first. She feels the depth of the connection. She senses its spiritual significance. She begins searching for answers. But the divine masculine often experiences the awakening differently. Instead of leaning into the connection, he may withdraw. Not because he does not care, but because the intensity triggers unresolved fears. Fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control, fear of not being enough. And until those fears are faced, true union cannot happen. Because union requires emotional courage. At the same time, the divine feminine also has her own lessons. She must release the need to control the outcome. She must stop measuring her worth by whether the divine masculine chooses her. She must rediscover her own power and independence. Only when both energies grow individually can they meet again as equals. Not as chaser and runner, but as partners. The hidden purpose of waiting. Waiting can feel like the hardest part of the twin flame journey. Days turn into months. Months turn into years. You may wonder whether reunion will ever happen. But waiting has a purpose that is rarely understood at first. Waiting forces you to build a life beyond the connection. Imagine if your twin flame returned immediately after your first separation. Would you have discovered your inner strength? Would you have developed your independence? Would you have pursued your personal dreams? Probably not. You might have built your entire world around the relationship. But the universe wants something greater for you. It wants you to become the fullest version of yourself. And sometimes that only happens when you are forced to walk your path alone. A story of divine timing. Consider the story of Daniel and Elena. When they first met, the connection between them felt electric. They talked for hours. They understood each other without words. Both felt certain they had found something rare. But only a few months later, everything began to fall apart. Daniel became distant. Elena felt confused and hurt. Eventually, the relationship ended. For years, they lived separate lives. Elena focused on her healing. She started therapy. She built a career she loved. She learned to enjoy life without waiting for someone else to validate her happiness. Daniel, on the other hand, went through his own journey. He faced personal struggles he had long avoided. He confronted the emotional walls he had built since childhood. And slowly he began to grow. Nearly 7 years later, their paths crossed again. This time something was different. There was no chasing, no running, no emotional chaos. Just two people meeting from a place of maturity and self-awareness. The connection was still powerful, but now it was stable. Because both of them had become the people they needed to be. The universe is not in a hurry. One of the hardest truths about the twin flame journey is that the universe is not in a hurry. It is not concerned with how long something takes. It is concerned with whether the foundation is strong enough to last. A relationship built too quickly may collapse just as fast. But a relationship built on growth, healing, and inner balance has the potential to endure. So when the universe delays reunion, it is not saying no. It is saying not yet. And that small difference changes everything. The question you must ask yourself, instead of asking, when will my twin flame come back? There is a much more powerful question you can ask. Who am I becoming while I wait? Are you growing? Are you healing? Are you discovering your purpose? Or are you placing your life on hold for a future that has not yet arrived? Because the twin flame journey was never meant to pause your life. It was meant to expand it. The ultimate realization. One day, if you continue walking your path of healing and self-discovery, you may reach a surprising realization. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer searching. You are simply living. And from that place of inner peace, something beautiful becomes possible. Union may happen, or it may not. But your happiness will no longer depend on that outcome. Because the greatest gift of the twin flame journey was never just the reunion with another person. It was the reunion with yourself. So if you are in a season of separation right now, remember this. The delay does not mean the connection is lost. It means something important is still unfolding. Growth is happening. Healing is happening. Transformation is happening, even if you cannot see it yet. Trust the process. Trust your journey. And most importantly, trust the person you are becoming along the way. Because when inner union is complete, the outer world has a mysterious way of aligning itself. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Where are you in your twin flame journey right now? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs today. And if you want more deep insights about twin flames, spiritual awakening, and soul connections, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Your journey matters, and you are not walking it alone.